And now, The Money Show
with Stephen Grootes on 702.
Let's walk the talk.
The Money Show with Stephen Grootes is brought to you by APMMA CIB, equipping you with efficient and secure cash management solutions for your business.
Good evening. Welcome to the program. I'm Stephen Grootes, 9 minutes after 6. Good to have you along with us this Wednesday evening. Quite a lot going on in different ways. Part of it, of course, is just what's going on the markets. We've had trading update after trading update today. You get a sort of dipstick on what's going on in the economy. Business confidence numbers were up today. Retail sales figures, not so great. We have a lot going on in the US as well. In the middle of all of this, the sort of it's beginning to look a little like a scramble to sort of properly recover, or to properly respond rather, to the tariffs imposed by the US. I think we're beginning to see the outlines of what the plan is going to look like. I was a little surprised to hear from EY today that they're expecting up to 100,000 jobs to go. When you consider, I've seen other estimates suggesting that before this, AGOA and other tariffs were responsible for maybe 0.4% GDP. I'm quite surprised at the figure of 100,000 jobs. We'll ask them in a few moments as to why that is. We'll speak to also Professor Jannie Rossouw from the Wits School of Economics and Business Science about government's responses to the tariffs. The Siphesihle Nxumalo from Baker McKenzie around what the Competition Commission is going to be doing all of this, and then Dwayne Newman from EY about this. There's been a fascinating ruling going through the courts, and we're getting a bit more clarity on it now. I don't know if you know this. I'm sure you've seen the same sign I sort of grew up looking at, which is when you take your car to a mechanic, basically there's a sign saying if you don't come and fetch your car, well, it will be sold to sort of defray expenses. I had to, ask someone, look up in a dictionary what the word defray meant when I first saw it, because, phones weren't around back then. Essentially, that's all going to change now, and I think it might change the business model of mechanics. We'll speak to the SA Motor Industry Repairers Association and the African Panel Beaters and Motor Mechanics Association on that. And Tata Cars and SUVs back on our roads soon. Motors will be managing that. Interesting because, I remember when they were here, you can still get them in different ways, but they're coming back, it seems, in a big way. And I made that point last night. For how long has it been that the biggest selling car in South Africa, the best selling car, has also been the cheapest selling car? Well, you've got Tata from India, you've got Chinese cars coming in. That sort of price pressure, I think, is suddenly going to be very, very interesting. There was an announcement today from Shoprite and ABSA, and basically they've agreed on a big rewards program and a sort of cashback program if you go shopping at Shoprite with your ABSA card. And we see this in all sorts of different ways. There are lots of different things. I must say, for a very long time, I was one of those people, whenever someone said, do you have a Clicks card? Do you have a this card? Do you have a Vitality card? Do you have a My School card? Sure, there's a group or two I've left out, but the ones just like, I just need to go. I don't know why, but I'm always in a hurry. Can I just pay? Thank you very much. And off I go. But I know someone, in fact, I know people who call her the Queen of Vitality because of what she's been able to get from it. And I'm sure you will know kings and queens of all of the other rewards programs as well. So my question to you tonight is, have I been an idiot by being in a rush all the time and not signing up for these things? Do you perhaps have a good example of someone who's really, maybe it was you, been able to get a good reward from these things? I know you'll know someone. 011 883 0702 021 446 0567. And voice notes, of course, tonight on 072 702 1702. Run 5 kilometers and all you get is a cappuccino. No chance, but.
The Money Show
with Stephen Grootes, live on 92.7 and 106 FM. Streaming on the Prime Media Plus app
and DSTV channel 856.
Well, a flurry of talking and of activity from government in the last 36 hours or so, all in response to the US tariffs. First confirmation, we have submitted a new improved offer to the US, and that in fact it seems the US is about to put on the water a shipment of blueberries for sale into our market. Now, the DTIC publishing draft regulations that will allow exporting companies, so South African companies who want to export, normally they would compete in our market, they'll be allowed to work together. So they could share shipping and marketing costs, and in fact, they would even be allowed to build export infrastructure together. These are draft regulations for the moment. Professor Jannie Rossouw is an honorary professor at the Wits Business School. Jannie, good evening. Good to talk to you again. I realize the DTIC wants to do something to help companies at the moment. There's a lot of pressure on them. Do these measures, are they going to make much difference? Do they really provide much support?
Good evening, Stephen. Good evening to the listeners. Yes, these measures will help, will give a degree of support. Anything that can help at this point in time we have to welcome. However, my concern is why announce this now with our backs to the wall? If we realize now that we're in trouble, that these regulations make it difficult for South African companies to export, why did we not announce this 5 or 10 years ago to boost our exports? It seems, therefore, that Competition Commission legislation is an obstacle to South African exports. It had to come to this crisis to address a fundamental underlying problem.
I mean, from what you say, basically no one has been thinking about trade in a constructive way until this crisis arrived.
Yes, indeed. And why had it come to a crisis to realize that our competition legislative structure is an obstacle to our export efforts? If we've done this 5 or 10 years ago, we could have had new markets open to us to the benefit of economic growth. So I've argued a long time ago that the Competition Commission is too much of a hindrance to economic activity in South Africa because they have too many objectives beyond simply ensuring competition in our economy. And this is really proof of what I've said all along.
Are there other measures government could take at this point to help businesses in this position? And I mean, it would be wonderful to subsidize exports. Government's not in a position to do that. Are there any other, I mean, do you get a sense that there are other measures that government could really take? I mean, we are, it seems, facing quite a crisis now.
Yes, get the rail structure to work again. It worked 30 years ago. The ANC government broke it down into the earth. Use energy to rebuild our rail structure rather than to have a national dialogue about questionable outcomes. Get our ports to work properly so that our exports can leave South Africa in a cost-efficient way. Use energy on these clear obstacles to exports rather than to dream about national dialogues that might cost 700 million rands. Use 700 million rands to get the port infrastructure in order. This is what we need at the moment. We don't need an ANC government that's married to ideology that's not worked for 30 years.
Professor Jannie Rossouw, thank you, an honorary professor at the Wits Business School. 17 after 6 now, the time on the Money Show. Siphesihle Nxumalo is a director at Baker McKenzie's Antitrust and Competition Practice Department. Siphesihle, good evening. As I understand these draft regulations, companies that want to work together to get into exports will have to apply to the Competition Commission first. Won't that really slow down this entire process?
Good evening, Stephen, and thank you for having me. I do want to, address the point that Prof spoke about, but before I get there, in fact, the powers under which the DTIC minister here has acted is what we call proactive measures by the minister. In other words, it doesn't require companies to apply themselves. So this is a unilateral action by the DTIC. So there is no application process that is involved. But what the draft block exemption envisages is a process in terms of which the companies that want to benefit from the exemption submit a sort of written arrangement to the Competition Commission for consideration. So it's not a strict application process as one would see in perfect competition conditions where companies say, I want to collaborate with X. Competition Commission, give me approval for me to do that.
Okay, so the Commission can still stop this but you're not going to wait for 6 months for a reply to your application. You're going to do it. You're going to explain what you're doing. You're going to tell the commission, and then you're going to get on with it. And if they don't like it, they'll come back to you.
Absolutely. The commission cannot stop it because it's being issued by the minister under Section 1010 of the Competition Act. What does that provision allow the minister to do? It allows the minister to act in times of economic urgency and stress to address things such as rising global tariffs. And we've seen this before during the COVID pandemic, where the minister, again, who was a functionary of government, issued similar extraordinary block exemptions. So the commission doesn't really have the legal power to block this, but what the commission can do is it can revoke, acting with the DTIC, it can revoke an agreement for collaboration that's been granted here if it falls or ventures outside of the parameters what's envisaged by the block exemption.
Okay. You heard Professor Jannie Rossouw being very critical of the way in which the Competition Commission has behaved. You clearly have a different view, Siphesihle. Let's hear it. What do you think?
Yeah, so really my view is, and again, I don't aim to speak for the Competition Commission, but the provision here is not a free ride provision that can be involved in let's call perfect competitive conditions, right? So it's really a provision that's involved in circumstances such as this, where there are economic challenges that needs to be addressed. Such as the participation of local players on the international plane. Now, to say that 10 years ago, we ought to have thought about this and issued such a block exemption really is something that's not situated within the four corners of the Competition Act, and particularly the provision here that's been utilized by the minister to issue these block exemptions. Again, I think the fundamental point, which you alluded to earlier when you introduced the topic, is that market players should act independently in the marketplace. And only in circumstances such as this, where some sort of a level of collaboration and coordination is required, can they then have this leeway under the Competition Act. Even that runway has limits, because they still need to determine things such as pricing, but independently, even with the benefit of a block exemption. So really, I don't think that it would have been appropriate outside the economic climate we find ourselves in to have these block exemptions.
Siphesihle, thanks very much indeed. Siphesihle Nxumalo is a director at Baker McKenzie's Antitrust and Competition Practice Department. Well, you've heard two views on that, one from Siphesihle, one from Jannie Rossouw. 011-883-0702 and 0214460567. Which way do you go on this? Meanwhile, Dwayne Newman is the EY Sustainability Leader and Tax Partner. Dwayne, good evening to you. EY is suggesting that we could actually lose up to 100,000 jobs because of these tariffs. Now, I expect it to be bad, but 100,000 jobs, how did you calculate that figure?
So, hi Stephen. Evening to the listeners. So that's the worst case scenario. So the economic modelling that we did sort of said, I suppose, 50,000 to 100,000 jobs. I mean, I think even some of the other commentators are pretty estimating even higher than 100,000 jobs. We think that is extreme. So I think probably 50,000 with, I think, all the support measures that have been spoken about by government. So I'm currently at the NARCAM show down in Port Elizabeth in Quebec, and the Minister of Trade and Industry and the Minister of Labour have also been talking about the support DTI is going to be giving to business, apart from the things like the export desk to help diversify to other countries. There was also a discussion about how do you keep people employed. So the TERS incentive, where businesses can apply for support for 75% of the wage bill of employees can be activated in these circumstances. So I think government is thinking really carefully of ways to minimize the job losses. Okay, and obviously I think our range of between 50 and 100,000. I think is an accurate range. I think also as well, it's not just the jobs; it's also the lost revenue. I think we estimated between 1.4 to 1.6 billion dollars of revenue loss. Now, obviously, that's going to be, I suppose, uneven across the sectors. So, as we know, the reciprocal tariffs of 30% are not across the board. That obviously affects things like citrus and wine, agricultural sector. We've still got the 232 duties on automotive at 25%. We've got the 50% on aluminium, iron and steel, and copper. Obviously, we do know that obviously aluminium and iron and steel have been subject to some of those duties for a longer period of time. So they are, I suppose, a little bit more well adjusted. So even though the numbers are high, they have been looking at alternative markets for much longer. And then obviously we've got the products which are exempt, like critical minerals, platinum group metals and the like. So there's obviously an opportunity that we can maybe even get increased sales into the US market and get some more value add in the local economy. So I think it's quite a big range.
Sure.
And I think we just need to make sure that we work together in a collaborative effort to minimize the job losses.
Sure. I mean, I hear the idea that we could maybe produce more critical minerals, more platinum, but I mean, the platinum price is nowhere. I mean, it's getting better, but for the moment,
Yep.
And then you've got to go, you're 4.5 kilometers underground already. I mean, all of this is really quite difficult to do, particularly if it could all change in Washington in 3.5 years' time.
Yeah, and I think they're right. So I think what has really become, I suppose the US has done is obviously shaken up, I suppose, the global view of how you use tariffs, right? Okay, but I think that most companies and most countries have to now become, I think, a lot more flexible. We do need to be thinking really very strongly about South Africa's attractiveness. So, are we attractive enough to attract investment? So whether it's PGM, as you say, okay, well, that's a bit challenging, but there are opportunities coming out of this. We also need to be thinking really carefully around all these sustainability rules and regulations. So even though in some jurisdictions maybe they've backed off, US has probably taken a bit more of a bigger bet against them, but in most jurisdictions they're still firmly front and center. And you can see sectors like the automotive sector are building it really into their strategies to make sure they're long-term sustainable.
Dwayne Newman, thanks very much indeed. EY Sustainability Leader and Tax Partner on The Money Show tonight, 27 after 6.
The Money Show.
The markets.
Chris Stewart's Portfolio Manager at 91. Chris, good evening. All right, well, a lot of updates today. Let's start with Capitec. They think their earnings will be up by more than 20%.
A very strong trading update from Capitec for the first half of their financial year, guiding earnings, I guess, at the midpoint of the range, somewhere around 24-25% earnings per share growth. This in an environment where I guess their competitors and their peers in the banking space, as we've seen, from Nedbank's results last week, and I guess as we'll discover later this week, in fact tomorrow, from Standard Bank and early next week from ABSA, are struggling to put together much by way of growth at all in the domestic market. So, a very strong performance from Capitec, and I guess one that we've become accustomed to from them.
Just stay with banking for a moment, but Nedbank buying Icoca, I think it's 1.65 billion rand. It's in the payment space, Nedbank. Obviously, already having a look at the money they expect to get from the sale of EcoBank, their stake in that.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, the EcoBank stake at market is probably worth somewhere around 1.8 billion rand. So this is a similar amount. The difference, I guess, is that EcoBank was contributing 1 billion rand of earnings to Nedbank's bottom line. And let's put it this way, eKhokha won't be contributing an equivalent amount. This is much more an investment in the future. I think all the South African banks are starting to realize that the traditional, fairly conservative model of asset-based lending is possibly not going to deliver the sort of growth that they need in the future. They're going to have to start looking into slightly more innovative lending techniques, into the informal and SME market. Capitec, again, have been leading the way in this space over the last couple of years. You saw Time Bank acquire a business called Retail Capital, who were doing a very similar thing in recent years. Now, Nedbank acquiring eKhokha, that'll give them, some fintech point of sale type exposure into the SME space, but also importantly, some sort of lending model into that space whereby, typically lending models are evolving more around cash flows. So you provide a loan to a small business, and instead of them paying you back and that loan being security against assets, they pay you back periodically as and when they can as a proportion of their turnover, as a direct deduction, if you like, through the point of sale device. Now, I mentioned Retail Capital earlier because Retail Capital, I think, had a partnership with eKhokha, with eKhokha doing the origination, Retail Capital providing the balance sheet. Retail Capital have subsequently been acquired by Time Bank. So I suspect to the extent that Nedbank are now acquiring eKhokha, there may be a small transfer of assets off the Time Bank balance sheet back to Nedbank as part of this transaction. I suspect that may be the case.
Very interesting. And very quickly, Naspers and Prosus were up today. That's because of, I presume, Tencent results.
Yeah, that is quite right. Tencent, very strong set of numbers today. That's got Naspers and Tencent going, and when Naspers and Tencent get going, Naspers and Prosus, I beg your pardon, get going, so does the all-share index. So they drag the all-share index up 100 basis points odd today, with Naspers and Prosus both up about 4%. Tencent up about 7% in the US. The US ADR trading up about 7%. That's on the back of a sort of mid-teens revenue number. That was a good beat. And, a high teens profit number on the bottom line. That's a good beat. In particular, their value-added services, their international gaming business going very well, their marketing services business also beating on the revenue front, and I think making the right noises with regard to investment in AI and AI technologies. They will invest, but they won't invest willy-nilly with no business case, and I think investors taking some comfort in that.
Chris Stewart, thanks so much. Portfolio manager at 91. A few seconds after 6:30.
WhatsApp Stephen
On 072
702
1702.
21 minutes to 7 the time. At the start of the show, I asked you if you were a points person or not. I'm not. Maybe I've lost out because of it, but I'm not one of these who wants to qualify for this program or that program. This is because ShopRite and Absa have a new cashback deal. Some of the messages are astonishing. So Tienes says, it's an important point, Tienes, you must have money to spend money to save money. Okay. PJ, you say, I'm a huge supporter of F&B's e-bucks. I save it up to make big purchases such as a couch, a washing machine, fridge, and so on. Really works for me. You and my wife, PJ, I don't know if you're in the same WhatsApp group. Laserman, this can't be true. You say, Steve, my wife once bought a dishwasher from Pick n Pay with her points. They changed their system, so you can't do that now. James in Constantia Cliff says, the cashiers, when she went to go and pay for it, were absolutely flabbergasted that she'd accumulated her points that way. Have you ever wondered, James, that maybe it was your wife that made them change it? Maybe all of us need to track her down. But a dishwasher, I mean, astonishing. A dishwasher. Other voice notes coming through tonight.
So just a feedback on the loyalty cards program. So for me, I was busy trying to figure out a diet for myself, and over the last year I wanted to figure out exactly how much do I spend on sweets, milk, dairy, food, meat, all of that type of stuff. And obviously you can go and search through your slips and stuff, but obviously most of us lose that. So I just sent a pop-up request to my local retailer where I do most of my shopping, and they have to provide you with that, all of the information that they have on you. And the only way that they can link that to you is through your loyalty card program. So yes, I got my data after fighting a bit with their legal department. But yeah, that's maybe a niche use case, but definitely an interesting one.
Yeah, I would love to have been in the legal office when they got that. Hi, I'm doing this. I would like to know what I've been buying from you, please. I bet they weren't pleased with all of the paperwork. It reminds me of the comedian in the UK who decided he was going to film a movie without cameras. All he did was he and his actors performed the movie in public spaces and then wrote and got all the CCTV footage because you had to give it to them, and then they released their movie. I thought that was very funny.
The Money Show.
With Stephen Grootes, live on 92.7 and 106 FM. Streaming on the Prime Media Plus app.
And DSTV channel 856.
Good evening. It's 13 minutes now to 7 o'clock. I mean, for as long as I can remember, whenever I've taken a car to a mechanic or been in a car that's been taken to a mechanic, somewhere on a sort of pretty dirty wall somewhere is a sign that says, if you leave your car there, it will be sold to defray expenses. And what that meant was, if you took your car to a mechanic and they spent money repairing it and you didn't come and pay the money, you just left the car, you're taking up their space, they would actually sell the car to someone else. So that someone would take the car away, they'll get their space back, they'll get their money, and someone else would now have the car. Now, a court has ordered that mechanics can no longer do this. Juan Hanekom is the National Director at the SA Motor Industry Repairers Association. Juan, good evening. I'm still amazed that people leave their cars and don't come and collect them. Cars are valuable things.
Good evening, Stephen. And yes, it is. It's something that a person doesn't always consider, but it happens more often than one would think. And it's clear, I think there are more elements at play here, and primarily it's a question of affordability. A lot of the time, the person who actually owns that car doesn't have the money to pay the excess in the case of an insurance claim, or they might have thought they had the capacity to pay the money when they brought the vehicle in, and then over time, when close to the time when they actually had to pay the final invoice, they found that they weren't able to.
Okay, so what would happen to the mechanic? They would be left with quite a lot of money that's owed to them, and this thing would be taking up space on their floor.
Yeah, that is probably the biggest aspect of that. So the money aspect and the cash flow in the motor body industry is a difficult one, regardless. But that space that vehicle takes up in the shop is one less space that you can hold a vehicle that could actually be moved through the shop. And eventually it does get to the point where the fees do accrue, and you do need to find a way out. And now with this ruling, it prevents the third parties that would typically get involved in the shop and do what they need to do to sell this vehicle off and recoup the fees. It prevents them now from doing that, essentially making that business practice illegal, which has its own challenges that comes with it. And it's certainly a win for the consumer because there's more security and certainty in terms of what happens with your vehicle and everything else that goes with it. There's a bit more of consent that goes with that. But in the MBR space, it's an additional challenge. There are already so many different hoops that a person has to go through in terms of being compliant and just day-to-day business operations. The general cost of compliance has risen quite a bit in the MBR space. And this now becomes an additional thing that obviously falls in. Our members are not lawyers at all. They do not know how to navigate these things. And this is where that third party would always come in and navigate the situation for these people.
Were people, the third parties in this case, was someone running a nice little business making quite a lot of profit of basically getting cars for, repaired cars for quite a cheap price in some ways and selling them on for more? I mean, I'm not making a comment about whether that's a good or bad thing. Someone spotted a gap. But were they sort of ripping people off in the process?
Stephen, it's honestly difficult to say. If they followed the process correctly and legally every time, which probably spurred on this conversation, it's a different story altogether. But I can't be 100% certain that they were ripping people off here. I think they did definitely take advantage of the situation, though.
Juan Hanekom, thank you. National Director for the SA Motor Industry Repairers Association. Listening to that is Sisa Mbangxa, from the African Panel Beaters and Motor Mechanics Association. He's their president. Sisa, good evening. Your members are affected by this too.
Good evening, Stephen. Good evening to your listeners. Yes, they are affected. This is a big problem where people, they take their cars into our members' workshop and they never show up again, or they don't pay it. So it stops our workshops.
Do you believe the ruling should be overturned? I mean, do you want to take some sort of action to stop this? Because I presume for some of your members, it puts them in quite a difficult position.
Yes, I mean, one has to go through the facts and understand well why did the court arrive into that decision. But the truth of the matter is that this industry is less regulated, Stephen. And then there are a lot of people who are taking chances. Even what is meant to be good for our members, it becomes bad. So one is not really sure. But the good thing about this ruling is not saying that our members cannot obtain a lien for the cars that have been there. It says to outsource it to the third parties. So maybe there is somewhere there, but one of the things that we should do is that we should educate our members more as onto how to go about to obtain the lien on those vehicles that are in their workshops. Because, look, before we become business people or presidents of the association, we are also consumers and customers. We fell victim of these things, where I was once a victim, where I was involved in an accident, and then I was not even injured that much, but I was taken to the hospital. But then someone came and found my cousin in the car who was not even driving. They made him to sign, and then they took the car to queue. And then, look, overnight, the car was already costing about 8,000 rands.
Sure.
You know, so there is some kind of an abuse. Hence, I'm saying that it's important that, all the associations, APMMA, Sambra, RMI, and also we need to get together at some point and try and see to it how best can you regulate. But people, they confuse regulation with with uncompetitiveness or monopolizing the industry. So whenever, and then that's the serious challenge here. There's a loophole. There are many loopholes. So I will assume then that that's the reason why maybe then that the court arrived into that decision, because there was an abuse that was taking place somehow. But in a nutshell, it is not good, because we want to get rid of those cars. As Mr. Hanekom has said, our members are not experts legally on how to go about into obtaining those liens and whatsoever. But then, this is what we have to try and make sure then that we address as a loophole. But I've seen a lot of people who have been losing their cars because of some unscrupulous business people in the industry.
Sisa, thanks very much indeed. Sisa Mbangxa is the president of the African Panel Beaters and Motor Mechanics Association. Juan Hanekom, national director of the SA Motor Industry Repairers Association. 6 minutes to 7.
7:02. Stephen is on X.
At Stephen Grootes.
Let's stay with cars, and I made the point last night that, the cheapest car in South Africa is usually the best-selling car. Well, the Indian car firm Tata, confirming it's re-entering market, it'll be re-entering our market. We'll be selling cars and SUVs here again. They were here for sale until about 6 years ago, although they withdrew, and there were still some imports, so there's still other ways to get it. But now, Motors Holdings will be managing their sales in South Africa. The CEO of Motors Holdings, Tata Motors Passenger Vehicles South Africa, is Tato Magasa. Tato, good evening to you, and thanks very much indeed for the time. How big do you think the market is for Tata vehicles in South Africa at the moment? There's a lot of competition around.
Good evening, Stephen, and good evening to your listeners. So in terms of market size, I think our market is growing quite nicely. If you're looking on perhaps a year-to-date number, our passenger vehicle market has been the one where we've seen the most amount of growth, where it's up year-to-date around 21%. A large proportion of this growth that we're seeing is below the 500,000 mark. And if you know the Tata brand and you're familiar sort of with its composition of models, it's got a lot of entry-level hatchbacks and SUVs which play directly into those segments. So we believe that the market is growing a bit, and there's an opportunity there for Tata.
Okay, so you're going for the cheaper end of the market. I would too if I were you. But Chinese cars are doing exactly the same thing. They're competing heavily on price. They might be just a little ahead of you in the market. Are you able to beat them, Tato?
So if you look at the South African market and vehicle sales and sort of country of origin, over 50% of imported vehicles that are sold in South Africa come from India. And that's largely due to the fact that India not only offers attractive SUVs, but also plays in the 5-door hatchback segments, which a large proportion, of course, vehicles coming from China don't necessarily play in. So if you look at Tata at the end of 2024 was the third best-selling passenger vehicle brand in India, and its strength really lies in those compact and subcompact SUVs, and of course it's hatchback. So we appreciate that, yes, there is some competition, of course, if you look at to the mid to large size SUV space, but I think when you speak to your hatchbacks and your subcompact SUVs, you don't necessarily see a lot of the new entrants coming into those segments.
You're going to have to compete on quality too. I mean, I realize you think there's not a huge number of cars, but I mean, I suspect that our car sector is about to get more and more interesting when it comes to competition.
Yeah, I think the sector is becoming a lot more competitive as consumer preferences are changing. Consumers are demanding a lot more technology into their vehicles. They're asking for good value for money out of their vehicles. And the quality of vehicles being sold in South Africa has improved significantly over time. And that's where I think Tata will also be quite strong, because not only are the vehicles going to be sort of boasting for great levels of technology and good value for money, but they have undeniable quality in the structural build of their vehicles. You know, Tata, if you know, in India has renowned as being the safest vehicles in its country due to just its NCAP ratings on some of its models, which speaks to the structural integrity of the vehicles that they're offering.
Okay, Tato, that's enough selling. But that's enough selling. I'm presuming that the models you're bringing in are all petrol models, or ICE models, all what's it called? Carbon,
yep.
You know what I mean?
Internal combustion engine.
That's the one, yes.
So in the first phase of our launch, we'll be focusing on internal combustion engines. A lot of the details around the specific models, the specific powertrains, and of course then whether it's petrol or diesel, we'll unveil that on next week on the 19th, where we have our official brand launch. We'll unpack a lot of that then, but we are going to start with internal combustion engines for now.
Tato Magasa, thanks very much indeed. CEO of Motors South Africa on the line. That's a fascinating question. I'm really looking forward to the competition. Coming up, what happens when we look at leaders, not as people, but just see their position? And then don't forget your shapeshifter this evening, Dr. Nimrod Mbele. It's just gone 7 o'clock.
The Money Show with Stephen Grootes is brought to you by APMMA CIB, equipping you with efficient and secure cash management solutions for your business.
And now, The Money Show
with Stephen Grootes on 702.
Let's walk the talk.
Good evening, I'm Stephen Grootes, 8 minutes after 7 with The Money Show. Well, so much to come. There's been this astonishing story about FNB and what happened with their call center. Someone was rerouted back to a fraudster. You'll hear the full version of that with your consumer ninja, Wendy Nola, in a little while. Also, just a response from FNB and the sort of explanation as to what happened. I don't know if you've ever thought about it, but how often we end up treating a person in a leadership position as a sort of symbol. We don't see them as kind of human, you know. You see them as, I don't know, you call them Cyril. You don't sort of think about the person. That happens in companies too. Have you ever noticed the sort of names people get? They get this or they get that. Well, we'll talk a little bit about that with Sapir Moyo in just a moment. And then your shapeshifter this evening is Dr. Nimrod Mbele, the MD at the Knowledge Anchor Group. Really looking forward to that conversation, actually. There's a lot coming out of that. You with The Money Show, you know the number. I'm sure you have a view on what's happening with, for example, the National Dialogue. Maybe you've had an issue with banks as well. And then also, of course, how we treat leaders. 011 883 0702 021 446 0567 and voice notes tonight on 072 702 1702.
702. Stephen is on The Money Show.
6 to 8 p.m.
You might have seen the Electricity and Energy Minister, Kgosientsho Ramokgopa, speaking this morning. And he said sort of the end of load shedding is kind of within our reach, kind of nearly there. He's always been very careful about how he sort of talks about that. And I think correctly, he's never sort of said it'll end tomorrow, it'll end in 6 months. I think he's been cannier than that, cleverer than that. But he also goes on to say that power must be affordable. We spoke a little bit about this earlier in the week. We've spoken about it a couple of times. Of course, he's correct. You must be able to afford electricity, and not just to sort of charge your phone, but actually, you know, to be able to cook on it or to heat water on it. And I can't help but wonder if he is careful enough to not promise the date by which load shedding will end, I think it might be a mistake not to say we must make electricity or to say we must make electricity affordable. I don't know that government can. If you look at the way the numbers have turned, if you look at what Eskom puts in its sort of applications to NERSA, if you look at what South Africans earn, at what you earn, I have a horrible feeling that actually it's not possible to promise affordable electricity. So the minister is right to not promise an end of load shedding by the end of the year. I think maybe he needs to take a leaf from that book when it comes to promising affordable electricity. I don't know if that is something that can be kept. I know you'll have a view. I look forward to it.
The Money Show.
Business Unusual.
Business Unusual is brought to you by Business Outsurance. Visit outsurance.co.za to switch and save today. So in 2018, and I remember the moment very, very clearly, I was with a group of people. I knew many of them quite well professionally, but not sort of socially. We were at a hotel in the Drakensberg. A lot of the people were very involved in our economy. They were involved in business. They were involved in our politics. And it was the first rugby test in which Siya Kolisi was the captain of the Springboks. And I don't think I'll ever forget that moment. This wasn't a normal sports match. It wasn't anything normal. Siya Kolisi wasn't in that moment a human being. He was, I suppose, a symbol, really, of so many things to so many people in South Africa. And this can happen in business too, if you think about it. How often have you come across a person who sort of is a symbol and isn't really treated as a human being? Sipiwe Moyo is an organizational behavior specialist. Sipiwe, good evening. It's such an interesting question. Why do we stop seeing a person when they take a top leadership position?
Yeah, Stephen, what an interesting story that you've just said, what happened in 2018. I think the main reason is that generally as human beings, we want hope, we want certainty, we want stability, we want predictability, we want order, and we want to anything that gives us a little bit of hope. I think we end up it ends up being a mystery, a symbol, as you are saying, a symbol of hope. But unfortunately, what then happens with a person like Siya Kolisi or a CEO is that there comes a point where maybe dehumanize is too strong a word, but there comes a point where we don't see this person as a normal human being with mistakes, with fears and so on. And I also had an interesting encounter with a few leaders 2 weeks ago, and hence I'm very fascinated by this question where a lot of the people in the room were saying we need vulnerability from a leader. We need leaders to tell us when they don't know and so on. And one leader stood up and said, I don't think you as my team want that. Every time I've said I don't know, every time I've said I've given you a bit of uncertainty, you have panicked and almost to a point where it looks to me that I don't have permission in this team to be human and have fears.
It's like sometimes the most disturbing moment for a young child is when they realize their parent is worried. Isn't it exactly the same thing? It's very disturbing when you realize that, because you realize actually I don't know what's going to happen here, and the person I rely on also doesn't know.
Absolutely, and that's such a spot-on analogy, and that's why many leaders have actually decided, Stephen, whether knowingly or not, to only share those vulnerabilities, those fears amongst other peer groups within certain leaders. And it's a fascinating question for me on whether as team members we can handle a moment of being a human from our leader. Because one of the things that leaders are saying is that a lot of our employees have always said they want to feel seen, they want to be treated as a human being, they want to belong. But interestingly enough, as a leader, I do not actually feel like I belong in my own team. I can never feel seen by my own team. So I have to have some peer groups somewhere where I can share my vulnerabilities and then come to my team almost like the mysterious symbol they want me to be, and literally give them what they need as opposed to my own need to belong.
We've seen recently in some places, there's a sort of wonderful Afrikaans word I want to use, but I don't think I will for various reasons, that people who show toughness. They espouse toughness. They're images of a tough man. It's always a man, isn't it? But I'm thinking of Trump. I'm thinking of Putin. I'm thinking of what's happening in other parts of the world. We sort of see people becoming leaders by showing they're hard. I mean, is that maybe related to this?
It is absolutely related to this. If you just think about the rise in nationalism and the rise in people who have said that to them demonstrates a little bit of certainty. Remember, as human beings, there is a deep desire for us to crave for certainty. And if you look at the entire world, with the volatility and uncertainty that we are facing, people are striving for anything that gives them predictability and order. So if, for example, you have some bravado, and it's definitely always a man, because there's always some research that proves that men can be hard and be liked at the same time, but women cannot be hard and be liked at the same time. And so this bravado, this figures of people who just seems to be sure, and sometimes it's weird because they are sure about wrong things, but to the people craving this stability, those are the people they lean towards, and they say, we want a brave leader, we want a leader who's charging the course, we want a leader who is very clear about where they are going. So it seems to me there is a dance that leaders must have with the idea of providing that certainty with the leader, having a peer group where you can actually have all your vulnerabilities, but it just seems, and it's becoming clearer and clearer, that it is impossible for any leader to be totally vulnerable with their people. There has to be an element. We did a little bit of an anecdotal experiment where we asked leaders, how many times do you say, I don't know, in front of your team? And what has that actually done? So it turns out many people in teams say we want the leader to say, I don't know. We want the leader to ask us a question. We want the leader to admit mistakes. But when leaders do that, unfortunately, they don't get the response that people say they don't. They start doubting them. And in many other instances, there are people who aspire for that leadership position when that happens.
Sure. Siphesihle Nxumalo. It's so interesting. Thanks very much indeed. An organizational behavioral specialist.
The Money Show.
Consumer Ninja.
Well, you might have heard it's the most bizarre story where it seems that a person at the F&B call center actually routed a person who had called in about fraud to a fraudster. Wendy Nola's been looking at this case. Wendy, good evening. We obviously live in a cynical age. There are lots of reasons why. We can thank the Hackatrons Union at Experian for that. But in this case, a person who's an F&B client got a call from someone claiming to be from F&B's fraud department. What happened after that?
Okay, so she was very clever, Stephen. So normally I get these cases and the person has fallen for it and followed the fraudster pretending to be from their bank and pretending that there's a pending fraudulent transaction on their account, and they get them flustered and say, just, read out these numbers. We're going to reverse the payment, and actually the numbers, the one-time PIN that's come to them from their bank via SMS actually is, the authentication numbers they need, the PIN they need to approve the transaction, and off goes their money. But in this case, Geraldine of Mpumalanga she got the call and she started being asked about the account, and there was a pending payment to purchase from Takealot, and she said, no. She ended the call. She did the right thing. That's the awful part of the story. She then did the next right thing, and she called her bank's real fraud hotline, and she knew it was the real fraud hotline because the number was printed on the back of an F&B card, right? Unbelievably, a legitimate F&B agent then transferred her call, and I'll get into how it happened a bit later, not to a colleague to reassure her that everything was fine with her account, but back to the fraudsters, the very same number that she'd been phoned on by the fraudsters. And then believing, she'd phoned her bank, the number was on the back of her card, it had to be her bank, and it was her bank, but unfortunately they transferred the call. She thought she was speaking to genuine fraud team members at the bank. So she, for an hour, chatted away, gave them all the so-called keys to her safe, and shortly after she ended the call, she was 300, luckily, she was 30,000 Rand poorer.
Sure. Okay. I mean, if this happened to me, my first thought would be that this was some sort of inside job, that this person was working, this call center agent was working with the fraudster.
Of course, and that's exactly what Geraldine and her husband thought, and that's what she wrote to me in an email saying it was definitely an inside job. And for context, most people, when they fall victim to this is called vishing. You get called up on your cell, and you mistakenly hand everything over to a fraudster believing they're from your bank. Normally they say afterwards, but it had to be an inside job because the caller, the reason I cooperated was they knew everything. They knew all my accounts. They knew the account number. They even could tell me some of my transactions. And that's because, as you alluded to a few moments ago, Stephen, all our personal, if you're active, if you have a credit profile, all our details have been compromised, right? Our bank account numbers, et cetera, they're all on the dark web. But the fraudsters still need our cooperation to actually get into our accounts, to make payments, to transfer money out. And that's why they have to phone us and trick us and get our pins out of us, right? So I thought this is very odd. So I got hold of FNB, of course, but and that's when I found this truly extraordinary story. So Geraldine was right in that it had to have happened. It had to have been an inside job. She was right there, but not the kind of inside job she meant, because as I found out when I took up the case with FNB's corporate affairs executive Jackie O'Sullivan, it was that agent's fault, that first agent she spoke to, but it was very much a mistake, and there is very hard evidence for that if someone's listening and saying, oh, pull the other one. But let's take a listen maybe we should first set the scene before we hear from Jackie O'Sullivan.
Let's hear from, sorry, Wendy, let's hear from Jackie O'Sullivan because I think we do need to hear them before we go any further in this.
Sure.
This was an unprecedented error on the part of the agent, and I use the word unprecedented with real intention, as we have literally no example of this ever having happened before. Of course, we had to investigate to ensure there was no hint of impropriety or criminal intent, and we were assured this was not the case by a few key factors. Firstly, the agent spent all 7 minutes of the call on the line. She never once left the caller to potentially make another call or message a third party. Secondly, the agent made no attempt to hide her identity. She spelled out her full name and surname to the customer. And when she said she was transferring the customer, she supplied the fraud resolution's telephone number, which the customer was being transferred to just in case of a dropped call. The agent was absolutely mortified when told of her error. She immediately and proactively offered to do a polygraph test to show her lack of criminal intent, and the agent has an unblemished record. A disciplinary process has to be undertaken and is being undertaken. We've spoken with our customers, we explained exactly how it happened, and we've compensated the full amount that was defrauded. We've also apologized profusely. This was an extraordinary example of human error, and we'll take all the steps necessary to avoid this happening again in the future.
All right, Jackie O'Sullivan from FNB. Wendy, I mean, it is the most astonishing case because your first thought, unfortunately nowadays, especially with phone calls and banks, your first thought is criminality. In this case, it was something else.
It was indeed. So what happened was she said to Geraldine, can you tell us what number the fraudster phoned you from? And of course she had it on a caller because we want to check if that is perhaps per chance, is a legitimate FNB number. So Geraldine read out the number and she noted it on what's called forget the name for the moment, but it's a separate pad that pulls up electronically on her screen, and it's to transfer the number. So she put the number there, denotes the number, and then instead of transferring her to her colleagues in the fraud division, she transferred her to, so she delivered Geraldine into the hands of the very fraudsters that she had escaped. I don't know what they must have thought, because I think that was unprecedented for them as well. And then Geraldine went ahead and said the rest. And the other reason why they said it was very unlikely, if not impossible, for it to have been intentional, cooperation with the fraudsters on the part of that agent was that the call, it's a massive call center, and there was no ways that she could have engineered that Geraldine's call came through to her and then deliver her back to the fraudsters. So all in all, I know a lot of people will still say, it had to be an inside job. But, it's never happened before. There's no evidence of it. It was just a really horrendous, shocking case of human error. And I think the good thing to come out of it is two things, Stephen. Number one, FNB now has a recording of an hour long of the fraudsters defrauding their client and how they did it. The modus operandi is in full display. They could learn from it and warn others. And you can be very sure that there would have been training around. If you have to note a fraudster's number in such situations, this is how you note it. You write it down physically. You make sure there's no possible way that you could ever accidentally then route our customer straight back into the hands of those fraudsters.
It's also just a reminder
quite an extraordinary case.
It's also a reminder of how many of these cases there are and literally how many people are out there trying to steal your money.
Absolutely. So if anyone says to you, I'm just sending you get an SMS, we need to read out these numbers of the number you get, because that's going to then reverse the fraudulent transaction. It's not reversing. You're going to be approving that transaction. You are going to be doing the exact opposite. It's really, really cruel. But yeah. So first of all, I would never engage. Call your bank directly. Yes, it is. My concern is that, must you not trust the number on the back of your bank card? But yes, absolutely. This was just a really odd one-off case, but there were some positives to come out of it.
Wendy Nola, thank you very much indeed. Your consumer ninja.
702. Stephen is on the Money Show.
6 to 8 p.m.
Well, in a moment, Dr. Nimrod Mbele, he's the CEO of the Knowledge Anchor Group. Looking forward to that conversation. An interesting comment coming through about the conversation we had around leadership and the idea that people say they want a leader to show vulnerability, but in fact they don't. This is from Zwede in Katlehong saying, Stephen, comment on your leadership discussion. As a leader, when the chips are down, the leader mustn't show fear. If they do, the fear filters down to the followers. Of course, a leader may solicit advice, but must acknowledge that the final decision rests on them. Zwede, I think you're right. I think what we get to, and Sipiwa Moyo was making such an interesting point, there's a difference between what people say they want and what they really, really want. And what they really, really want from a leader is someone who actually leads, takes decision, doesn't show fear. I think all of that really does matter. You're at the Money Show. It's just gone 7:30.
702 with Stephen Grootes.
Email him on stephen@702.co.za.
On the next Money Show, Standard Bank's Chief Executive, Sim Tshabalala, will take us through the lender's latest half-year financial results as we make our way through the results season. Then Investment School will be in. Vincent Anthony Raja, CEO and co-founder at Differential Capital, will be your headmaster. He'll share some tips and advice on how to grow and protect your investment portfolio. Also, analysis of all of your top business news of the day.
The Money Show.
Shapeshifters.
Well, shapeshifters come in all shapes and forms. They do all sorts of different things. They all have impacts in different ways. Some start companies, some do other things, some help companies, some don't. But some of them play a role in what I suppose you would call the knowledge space, the thinking space, the making us better at governance space. And one of them is Dr. Nimrod Mbele, currently CEO of the Knowledge Anchor Group. Nimrod, good evening. I really appreciate you taking the time to come in, and thanks for agreeing to spend some time with us as our shapeshifter.
The pleasure's mine, Stephen. I thank you for the invitation.
I went to your LinkedIn profile and I went to your education because that's how I can sort of place someone, because I found that we had such a big change. Our society's changed so much from the sort of period before 1990 to kind of the period after 2000, if I can call it that. And I noticed that you studied at Wits from, I guess, 1991.
Yep.
I'm a little younger than you. And I wondered what that experience was like because of how the country was changing. So Wits was changing, but South Africa was changing radically in those years. And there you were as a young person, as a student. You would not have been allowed to vote yet. And there you are studying governance.
Absolutely. I mean, it was quite remarkable, Stephen. As you've correctly pointed out, everything changed at the time. We had new political dispensation that was imminent. We came from, a racially diverse education system. Back then I used to be an A student, but I realized that the standards were completely different when I got to Wits. I had to adjust, in the most atrocious way, because the gap was just too huge. Everything, you compete with creme de la creme, private schools, so it was quite tough at the time. But, you stay focused and you don't forget the reason why you were there. You get support from, Wits at the time had a very good support system for especially black graduates, because they understood the performance standard or the standards were completely different. So you just have to enroll and you avail yourself, irrespective of how uncomfortable it was, because it's a cultural shock. You did very well at some point, and suddenly you realize that you are just beyond mediocre.
Sure,
you just need to literally pull yourself up by bootstraps and focus on business at hand.
You came from Tokoza.
Yep.
And Tokoza itself, if I recall, was the center of some terrible things happening.
It was burning.
Yeah. And that must have been quite tough. Were you still living there and commuting? Were you on res at Wits or somewhere in the center of Joburg? Your family would still have been in Tokoza, of course?
My family was still in Tokoza. But because of the social upheaval, it was not practical.
Yeah.
I had to, I stayed in Hillbrow at SLM residence with friends. Even during recess, I would not dare set foot at home because it was that volatile.
Sure.
And that's how I survived. It was not easy, but here I am.
The community that you came from to get you to Wits when the government really did not help much at the time, that must have been quite something. What kind of school were you at?
Well, I was in an ordinary public school called Landulwazi, and we had a phenomenal teachers. Our principal was very supportive. His name was Potgieter, and he understood, the makeup of black people. He understood the makeup of students.
Was he a white person?
He was a white person. And back then we had quite a sizable cohort of white teachers in the township. And most of them were Afrikaans speaking, teachers. And who were just there to offer their services in uplifting, community, in uplifting the quality of education, because they were relatively better off. Were they the best? I'm not sure if they were the best, but they were relatively better off compared to the teachers that we had at the time. We didn't have the right maths teachers, we didn't have the right science teachers. The schooling was disrupted from time to time. Literally, you'd be lucky to go to school for a week.
Yeah.
Because of those disruptions. But we stay focused. We had a very good support system. And the rest is history, as they say.
You were studying politics in the early 90s, right? And I did just one course in politics. I shouldn't tell you this, but it was in 1994. And I remember my poor lecturer having to make it up as she went along because everything was changing, right? You must have been through the same thing. You never really knew. How would you describe the South African political system in 1993? I have no idea.
Well, it was very interesting because, typically every black folk in the main, we either do law and arts. And very few back then were in the faculty like commerce, engineering, that type of stuff. Growing up in the township, politics was ingrained in your system. Social justice was part of your agenda. Transformation was part of your agenda. So you obviously were exposed to Russian politics, European politics, colonialism, and that ideals on how you move away from colonial setup to a post-colonial setup, particularly in the South African context. So it was quite interesting from that end. But I soon realized that I wasn't cut out for politics. In as much as I did very well academically, because I have a very good sense of debates, grasping, divergent views, and aligning my thoughts in a very convincing fashion, I would imagine. But I realized that politics was not my field, because maybe
you're just too good a person.
No, I just don't have patience for Yeah, I just don't have patience for people who are not authentic. I don't have patience for people who take others for a ride. I have no patience for, spending time in meaningless conversation where we're not going anywhere. Take a decision, stick by it, and let's move. That's why then I decided to go into business.
You went into business. You also did some more education. I don't know if you felt you completed it with the doctorate or if you're still learning. I'm going to come to that in a moment. I was interested to see that you spent some time at the Regenesis Group.
Yeah.
And you were the head of local government there. And I can't imagine how you felt driving here tonight through the streets of Joburg. And it's not just potholes, it's water, it's this, it's that. And having an academic and a deeper understanding of local government than almost everybody, I mean, that must be quite a sort of thing.
Yeah, look, I mean, the condition has deteriorated badly, over time, because we failed as a system to pursue meritocracy in terms of appointments of leaders, in terms of providing sufficient incentives. We have allowed the patronage system to take over. We have allowed a system that appreciates mediocrity and that appreciate underperformance. And it's very difficult. We can't even fix potholes. We can't fix street lights. We can't fix litter. And these are not big ticket items. And I often say, the health of any environment starts by cleanliness. The moment you see litter in municipal buildings, then you realize you've got a problem. And you get to administrative issues like unqualified audits. You have disclaimers. So Regenesis back then ran a capacity building program that is meant to try and address those competencies for senior executives within municipalities so that they are on a positive trajectory that adds value to the system which they served. But unfortunately, as we all know, that went, further and further down to a point where, every other municipality is technically bankrupt. And we've got audit findings that are adverse and there's no consequences management. AG from time to time brings a whole lot of reports which don't go anywhere because we just don't have a culture of accountability, and impunity has been systematized. Because patronage has literally, like an albatross around our neck. Perhaps maybe there's an end in sight because political system has changed. Coalitions has their own pros and cons. But on the positive side, we're seeing the needle of accountability picking up a little bit.
Sure,
which is
positive.
Right. Which is positive.
I mean, I'd hoped that there'll be a lot more accountability because we were moving away from sort of predictable elections, and gosh, I don't see that.
Well, I mean, we're getting there. It's going to take time because unfortunately we have to get to a point where we get the economy right. And the focus in any economic development is to getting the economy back on track. Let's fix our SOEs, which have become liabilities. Once you sort up SOEs in terms of legislative frameworks, in terms of competent boards and clear mandates of those SOEs, we more likely to be transition. I'm sure you all know that we've got a National Enterprises Bill, which failed, to materialize purely because it was just cut and paste in so many instances. There was not enough consultation around the ideological posture of these entities, which are meant to create value as opposed to being a drain. So I'm quite optimistic that we are moving towards the right direction.
I'm going to throw you into some controversy now. Okay, I don't know what your answer will be. You pointed out that what happens in councils is patronage, and there's a massive debate going on in society again. It's happening now again for various reasons about black economic empowerment. There are some people who see BEE and patronage and cadre deployment as three different words to describe the same thing. And they are defenders of black economic empowerment. Saki Makazoma was sitting in that chair a couple of months ago, pointing out that without BEE, it would be very hard to imagine black leaders in his position, or very hard to see the economy transform. Where do you sit in that? I mean, is BE and patronage the same thing?
No, definitely not. Let's understand the principle behind Black Economic Empowerment first. It's about social justice, which invariably speaks about equity. We all understand where we come from as a people. We needed to have a redress mechanism, and BE was perceived as or conceived as one of those interventions that could lay the political, that could lay the economic landscape. The execution is different, but we must draw a distinction between policy design and implementation. The design is justifiable. The design had to happen for every other country where there's been in the disconnect or inequalities. There have been some form of intervention by the state. How BE was translated into action and how it was implemented, it's something that where we need to focus our energies on.
Professor William Gumede, I'm sure you know him. Yep. I don't know if you've ever managed him. I don't know what he's like to manage. I always find him incredibly thoughtful in public. But I suspect he likes an argument. I hope he does. He's suggested, and I see that his views now quoted in The Economist, where he said that BEE's probably cost us R1 trillion or so, and that's been divided by just 100 people. I have asked him about it informally, and I think there's a bit more nuance to what he's saying. But that is a hard thing to justify if that's anywhere close to true.
Look, I mean, there's an element of truth in the article that he wrote about. I mean, I do know him quite well. You know, he taught me at some point, and we have also shared numerous spaces where we discuss these kinds of issues. There's an element of truth in his posture, because we failed to implement the policy correctly.
Yeah.
If you're going to deploy people who are not qualified, if you're going to ring fence, strategic programs or strategic contracts to few elites who have no credibility, who have no history of delivery, who are not qualified, you are going to spend a lot of money. These billions that he's making reference to are going to be wasted because you're not really filtering down wealth. You're concentrating wealth to those that have proximity to power. In the main ANC cadres who are still raking it big time with such impunity. But does it mean it was ill-conceived? My answer is still no.
We're speaking to Dr. Nimrod Mbele this evening, the CEO of the Knowledge Anchor Group. He's your shapeshifter tonight, 9 minutes to 8.
The Money Show.
Shapeshifters.
Your shapeshifter tonight, the CEO of the Knowledge Anchor Group, Dr. Nimrod Mbele. Nimrod, such an interesting name, the Knowledge Anchor Group. What do you mean by that? Are you anchoring yourself in knowledge?
Thank you very much. That's a very interesting question. A colleague of mine who happened to be a partner, we debated this issue because we wanted to position ourselves in the likes along the same line with your PwCs of this world, the KPMG of this world, and what is the common denominator with most of consulting firm is technical expertise.
Yeah,
that is research oriented and that is evidence based. Because that's all what you offer. Because you offer insights, you offer strategic guidance, which is grounded in evidence, which is grounded in research. For you are meant to address problems of entities, whether it's government departments, whether it's SOEs, or whether it's just private business, around policies, HR policies, financial policies, around governance configurations or architecture of governance. It's about reporting. It's about integrated reporting. All those kinds of pillars that makes or break any company. We had to, we had to formulate a plan on how or what is that you want to be known for on a basis of what we're offering, which is grounded and practical. Hence, knowledge anchors.
No, I think I get it. You've written a book recently, and you've suggested we need to move from what you call a leader-centric type of management to a leadership-centric type of management. For 5 points, describe what you mean, and for 10, do it without mentioning Rassie Erasmus.
Leadership-centric. Let's look at the system. Any organization does not depend on one person. A systems approach. It's about organizational culture. Is it a positive culture? Is it empowering? Is it a nurturing culture? It's about meritocracy. It's about accountability. Is it about performance? It's about value add. So all these variables do speak to a leadership-centric phenomenon as opposed to lead, because it's not one individual. It doesn't matter how brilliant you are. We've seen in SOEs, we bring creme de la creme, but they falter because they're just not surrounded by a leadership cohort that understands what they need to be doing. So it doesn't matter how good you are, but if the environment is not supportive with technically sound men and women, you're just bound to fail. Hence, that is the thinking.
We spoke to someone recently. She runs a dairy now, but she used to work for the Mars Group, the big American, well, I think it's American, I think it might be British actually, but the big sort of food conglomerate. They do all sorts of things. And she said because it was family owned, it didn't matter where in the world she was. She knew when she was in their office because of the culture. And I've been thinking about that a bit because, I think multinationals do that really well, successful ones. And I've worked in a company where you can see leadership. If the leader's not available, someone will make a decision almost as if the leader was there. And I've worked in a company where everyone's a follower. How do you do that practically? It's quite tough. You have to empower people to be leaders when you yourself are a leader.
No, and it's very true. And it's all about understanding a template of what makes a solid organization. It's all about, first and foremost, meritocracy. It's all about empowerment. It's all about support. All those good things. But most importantly, it's about execution. And consistencies in your execution. If somebody does wrong, you know what happened. You know what to do. If somebody's performing, you know what to do. You've got dead woods, you know what to do. So those are some of the important things that makes or break an organization, because you've got a clearly defined template of what, for example, let's look at Prime Media, its evolution. When it started some years ago, whoever thought it to be where it is today? Because those are building blocks of a well-composed leadership. When you talk about succession planning, for example, you know that in the next 5 years, we're grooming this group of individuals. You are clear in your mindset, you're clear in your plans. There are no, knee-jerk reaction. In that way, you're able to sustain an organization, because leadership, it is just that. It's not only just about the bottom line, but it's about making people feel that this is the best place to work for, or this is the best company to work for. And there's no need for people to be hopping and jumping purely because that leadership is that empowering.
Dr. Nimrod Mbele, thank you very much indeed for coming in tonight and being our shapeshifter, the MD at the Knowledge Anchor Group. It's fascinating. There's so much to talk about. We could go on forever, but I really appreciate you taking the time this Wednesday. Thank you very much indeed.
The Money Show with Stephen Grootes is brought to you by APMMA CIB, equipping you with efficient and secure cash management solutions for your business.
Well, in the US, it's been another positive day building, I suppose you could say, on the JSE, but mainly because of interest rate expectations in the US. The Dow Jones is up 0.6%, the Nasdaq is up 0.11%, and the S&P 500 is up 0.13%. Plenty to come in your Money Show tomorrow. Don't forget the CEO of Standard Bank, Sim Tshabalala, on their results. Also, we will be speaking to iKhokha on their sale to Nedbank. The management, I understand, are being locked in. It will become a subsidiary of Nedbank. And we will also be looking at some of the other events that are happening as well. Don't forget Investment School tomorrow as well. Vincent Anthony Raja will be back here wearing his, I suppose you would say, his principal's cape. If principals still wear capes. Looking forward to that. We will see you again tomorrow. Good evening. Thanks for being with us on The Money Show. It's 8 o'clock.